Thanks. Well, greetings everybody, and welcome to the eighth of these panel discussion sessions at SGA22. My name's Dale Sims. I'm the president of the Australian Institute of Geoscientists, and I'd like to welcome you here today. And on behalf of the AIG, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on where we meet, wherever we are globally. For me, that's the Warramai people in the country where I live, northern inland of Newcastle. And we also want to pay our respects to the elders, past, present, emerging, and to, in fact, all of those Indigenous custodians. So today we're talking about, or in this session, we're talking about Geoscience Outreach. The topic is, how can baby boomers connect with Gen Z? I do want to be clear that we're not being exclusive here. It's not just baby boomers and Gen Zs, it's for anyone. Gen Xers, millennials, even people who are older than boomers, if that's possible. So it's a wide range of generations. It's about communication, intergenerational communication. So communicating the social and physical roles of geoscience in addressing our shared needs around the UN Sustainability Development Goals requires intergenerational outreach. So too does attracting, teaching and developing the future generations of geoscience professionals to deliver to these needs. The panel that we have here today are passionate geoscientists, educators, communicators, and together we want to address a simple question in the next hour. How can we, as the current geoscience cohort, better communicate with and inspire our future professionals? So I'll just briefly introduce our panel and they'll join us here in the room. And then we'll move on to some discussion points. Let me introduce Jenna Mcdonough. Jenna's a representative of the AIG Next Generation Geos Group. She's a minerals explorations geologist, and she's passionate about raising awareness of the importance of geoscience in the wider sphere. We also have Dr. Hayden Mort, who's the managing director of a company called Geologize. He's a researcher largely with around 15 years of experience. And his company Geologizes is a company that seeks to train a generation of Earth scientists to communicate more powerfully with the general public. We're also joined from Melbourne by Alanis Olish-Byrne. Alanis is a PhD student at James Cook University in the north of Australia. She's looking at structural controls around rare earth element deposits. She loves talking about all things geology with the general public and motivating future generations. So you can see why she's on our panel. We also have Craig Pereira. Craig's in Darwin, actually sitting in the kitchen of the core library in Darwin right at the moment. He's a geoscientist graduate from University of Queensland. He's also a project exploration geologist, and that work takes him around the world. Dr. Peter Betts from Monash University is the GSA, the current Geoscience Geological Society of Australia president, and Peter's joining us. He's a professor in structural geophysics, the School of Earth, Atmosphere and Environment at Monash Universities, and he's passionate about these issues. And we also have Dr. Melanie Finch from James Cook as well as Alanis. Dr. Finch is a superstar of STEM and the current president of Women in Earth and Environmental Sciences Australia, WMESA. And lastly, we have Richard Lilly. Richard's from Adelaide University. He's also the CEO of a group called Nexus. Nexus is the National Exploration Undercover School. And Richard's formerly an exploration geologist from who did a number of years working in Mount Isa. He's moved on now and he's involved in these in developing national initiatives related to both mineral exploration and geoscience in STEM and STEM education. So please welcome the panel to the room. Great. So we've had some instructions. There's a lot of us here. We're going to start talking around the generalities of this issue of outreach, because outreach is about not just talking to ourselves, that sort of in-reach, as we talk geologists to geologists or geoscientists to geoscientists. Outreach is beyond our normal boundaries and often talking to non-technical people. And so part of that outreach story is how we've been affected or engaged in geoscience as well. And obviously, you know, what may have worked for us could work for other people. And so it's important for us to be aware of those influences. So I wanted to move around and ask a few of the members of the panel, particularly on the younger end, Jenna, Alanis and Craig, if you reflect on your experiences with geoscience, how you got interested in it, was it through inspirational communications and outreach, or just happen chance? Alanis, could you maybe start?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Dale, for the introduction. Yeah, how did I get involved in geoscience? What a difficult question. I think I actually kind of stumbled upon it because here in Australia, we don't actually teach geoscience at high school or in primary school. And the only opportunity you have to actually study geoscience is at university level. So I was doing environmental science and then kind of had this flick go off in my head and realized that geology was kind of the one science that encompassed all other sciences. So chemistry, biology, environmental science. Geology was kind of like the sole focus where I could kind of draw on all different aspects and be able to build, I guess, a really good foundation of on understanding how the earth actually works.
Great. So that flick happened during your course. You got exposed to a geoscience course during your education.
Yeah, exactly. I did a first year course because I had to meet all of my requirements, and then I did my first year at Monash University, and I just once I was in there, I didn't leave, and that really had a lot to do with the people teaching the unit as well, who are actually teaching the content and actually were able to you know tell students in a way that got them really interested and love geoscience.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Actually, I've already forgotten to mention something to the audience. Um, Rather than use both the audience chat and the submit question box, can you just push everything into submit questions if you've got even if it's just a comment, because we can only see one box in this setup, and if you put it in the submit questions, then people can either give it thumbs up too. They can either like it or maybe not like it. But that's just a commentary. Thanks very much, Alanis. Maybe Jenna, could you maybe also comment? What was your exposure? How did you get inspired?
I actually started off university doing radiography, but shortly realised that I didn't like blood or vomit, so I accidentally enrolled in an earth science subject based on general science, and the applications from radiography are very similar to geophysics, so started to transfer my knowledge from radiology across to geology, plus you get to travel and you get to solve the bigger problems. So yeah, I stuck with it clearly.
So an accidental enrollment. Accidental. Yep. Well, yeah, serendipity. There we go. And how about you, Craig? What's been your experience?
I suppose for me, I grew up, a bit of history, I grew up in Dubai and I spent a lot of time with my family up in the Seamount Ophiolite, just camping and having barbecues and stuff. And I used to always ask questions about how these mountains form. Part of school, at a young age, we did a lot of projects with volcanoes, earthquakes. So I was always really interested at a really young age. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't really know there was a career in geology till about grade 10 or 11 when I actually met one of my friend's dads who's a senior exploration geo, and he really gave me an insight of what he did. And I went, cool, you get to be outdoors, you get to go camping, you get to drive four-wheel drives, you get to have heaps of fun from what it sounded like. And I was like, well, that kind of sounds like what I like doing. And I had that intrinsic interest in I suppose, earth science and how things formed. And then, yeah, realised there's an awesome course that you can do at university and then enroll for that. And that's how I fell into the world of geoscience.
Great. And you're still enjoying the outdoors and having heaps of fun?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks. That's great. And it's overall it's sounding like it's more by accident than by design and by plan. And I might throw to Melanie and Richard here. Melanie and Richard are both in sort of geoscience tertiary education. I was wondering, is that a common experience that you find that people just trip over geoscience? And if they do, well, that's great. But if they don't, how do we push their buttons? How do we find the people that to trip over in the first place? What's your experience, Mel?
Yeah, it's such a common anecdote, what Alanis and Jenna just related to us, that, people discover love of geoscience by accident. And yeah, as Alanis highlighted, that this is because it doesn't feature so heavily in our high school curriculum here, although, hopefully that changes in the future. So what can we do to ensure that we're reaching more people? I think it's about talking to the general public more about how awesome geoscience is, how we understand these processes that you've wondered about, that Craig wondered about from the time he was a kid. So how mountains are made and how why volcanoes erupt. Things like that are quite exciting and engaging. So I think, yeah, that's a really common experience that they related. I also think that, we're hearing more lately from the mining industry about more reports coming to light of harassment and assault of women, and I know that my students are hearing about that as well, and they're asking me about that. So I think that the mining industry needs to get that situation sorted out, as well as the way that they treat cultural sites, Aboriginal, Indigenous cultural sites. So all of those things give industry a bad name and put off the young people that we're teaching every day, and that needs that social responsibility side, and protecting workers needs to be taken care of before students feel like moving into the mining industry is a really safe and good choice.
So I mean, there's plenty of negative images there, isn't there? And it's not hard to get a bad impression of the industry, even if you don't know very much about it. And I know Hayden's been posting about that just in the last 24 hours. But certainly, mining isn't the only avenue for geoscience. I mean, it's a major one, but it's not the only avenue for geoscience. And this outreach is largely around the love of the science and the love of the earth. So that's the angle where people take it is that other opportunity. Richard, what's your exposure there with with this motivating? We're talking about outreach, future generations. You're seeing them come through. We're not doing a great job at it. I mean, what are the impressions you get from the cohorts that are coming through? Are they largely ignorant of what we do?
Yeah, look, I think everyone's comments that they've made so far, I think mirror, I think we've all got into geoscience for our, love of outdoors and many other reasons like that. Certainly I see what I realized, I grew up in the UK and did geology, luckily enough to do geology at high school, and then took it to university. And of course, in the UK, where, almost all the extractive industries have closed down, if you do geology, people sort of think you're like dinosaurs or whatever. And whereas you grow up in Australia and people think you're going to be, buying lots of houses and jet skis. So it's sort of, there's different perceptions, I think, in different countries of where a career can take you. What I do see, even when student numbers, which they follow the boom and bust of the cycle, which is something, that's been talked about for hundreds of years, that's probably not going to go away. But obviously when there's a boom, people realize a couple of years later that they can get good jobs, so they come into it. So in Australia, there is a bit of a drag from that career aspect. But of course, Melanie's raised those points, which you can't get away from. And I think I'm pleased that the industry is having these conversations and is normalizing conversations in these areas. And obviously we can do better in a lot of ways. But I think even when the numbers of students come really low, we still have a good base number. Certainly somewhere like Adelaide, there seems to be enough people that want to look at rocks and lit rocks to, fill the seats. But whether that meets the demand for, a booming mining industry is the other question. That's why I guess, you do have a good, how do you inspire these people? I think, like say in the low point of enrollments, you see the people doing geology, the passionate ones, they've had that moment of, I get paid to look at rocks. That's awesome. And that really sort of becomes, that's your sort of your base load of geologists. It's when how do you bring in the numbers required for the industry? So I guess there's two questions there. Personally, I got into geology by, as Aussies know, most of the beaches in the UK are covered in stones. So I used to skip the stones on the sea when it was calm enough, and every now and then there'd be a fossil in one, so I'd keep it. And I guess that drew my attention to it. And then even then, it took until second year of uni until I realised that you could actually get paid to go to Australia and look for gold. And I think that's still a draw for a lot of people internationally. But again, I think the main reason, and this is from students, but also industries, people just don't know about geology. Like Alana said, it's not taught in schools in Australia. very rarely taught in schools in the UK. Every year, the curriculum level of geology or geoscience and STEM gets lower and lower. It gets squeezed out to fit everything else in. And even at university, even at the end of third year, most students have a very poor perception of what careers they could go to. They think maybe I'm be a mine geo or an exploration geo. They haven't been informed, or they're not aware that there is that huge scope of spectrum of jobs available out there. So I think we need to do as a salute, I think, we need to get more knowledge about what geoscience even is at school level. And, a good way to do that would be to train teachers. So they actually understand something they can teach.
Yeah. So, sorry, panel, I meant to mention, if you want to chime in with any of this stuff, just sort of raise your hand and get my attention. I think, Pete, you were trying to do that? Can we
No, I was
unmute
fidgeting,
Pete?
mate. Sorry.
Fidgeting, yeah. Get a bit of that nervous
Yeah.
tick. I know what it can be like. So, well, and I think, the idea of, finishing your degree and then not even knowing where you can take it. I mean, obviously, educators, that's not part of the educators want you to understand the science and be passionate about geology. You need to have any range of careers, but then what those careers are, who knows?
Well, I think, Dale, just to chip in there, I think you raised a point there of how many educators in geoscience in Australia have actually worked outside of a geology department. It's so hard for young academics to get a foothold in academia, to have an academic career where they can be teachers, and you just don't have time. Secondments for teaching academics into industry would be great, but that's a paper they could write, which they need to keep their job. So it's really hard to actually get that balance. And obviously a lot of companies want to come into unis and talk about industry, but there's sort of very limited sort of coordination in that kind of effort. So it can be quite sporadic. It needs champions. But I think in university, I've always said, could do a lot better in this space in terms of educating their students about career options.
Okay, well, look, Pete, you got your hand up?
Yeah, so a couple of things there. So one of the things that has kind of dawned with me in the last couple of years is we contextualize the challenges that we have in the university sector in recruiting students and from past experience. And so we have to be mindful that when we have a generational change, which we are seeing now, and the Gen Zs are now arriving into the university sector, that they have different value sets and perceptions of the world that we need to be cognizant of. And with that, it requires really listening and trying to understand the generation. As a mid-career researcher, I really did make a mistake, in my opinion, in hindsight, with the millennials. I was getting really sort of dirty on the value sets of millennials, because my expectation was that generation would behave like me as a Generation X, and that was completely unfair of myself to do that. And so what that really requires, in order to make that connection, because most of us sitting in the university sector are millennials and or X's, and there's remaining boomers, is to listen better. Listen to the challenges and the issues that the next generation has. Be empathetic, and then try and align what you're trying to achieve with what that generation wants and desires. And so, and which means we've got to stop telling people how to think and behave, and we have to actually change the way that we think and behave in order to align with them, because that generation is the future, not me as the 51-year-old Generation X sitting here giving my opinion. And we have to be really mindful of that. And so I just wanted to just say that, because it's kind of related to that aspect of the conversation.
Well, I think it's a really good point, Pete. This whole concept of the bloody the wisdom of the frickin' elders. Well, sometimes the elders actually don't have a lot of wisdom at all. So it's the balance of how do you get that feedback happening. Now, I'm mindful. I want to engage with our audience, and we're getting some questions rolling in here. So there's one from Annette. Now, the print's very small here, but Annette, you're talking about this issue of the 60 Minutes program, sexual harassment in the industry, and targeting younger females, and of course, there's a challenge in us doing that. Geoscience is part of that workplace. I just wanted to throw that as a current issue, and I might ask Hayden to mention it because he's posted on it in the last 24 hours. Hayden, do you want to just make a comment? I'm not sure if you can see Annette's questions, but certainly this issue is a major one and it's not going away. We haven't got you, Hayden. No audio, mate. No. No. Testing 1, 2.
Now, okay?
Yeah, got you, mate.
Okay. So the reason I posted that today on LinkedIn, or yesterday for you guys and girls, is because out of frustration. So I want to help the mining industry, and something like this happens, and it's a shot in the foot. And it seems to be like they're either blowing up caves, or you've got this huge issue going on, which I had no idea about this, and it seems to be relatively prevalent, and it's a bit like, the Catholic scandal that happened a few years ago. I hope it's not the tip of an iceberg, but it just makes the communication of the geosciences that much more difficult to convince the public, and that's why I found that so exasperating when I saw that. It's this conversation that has to be nailed, has to be covered right now, and has to be denounced by the MCA, by the AusIMM, by everybody, very, very publicly indeed. I haven't seen that yet. So I just, this is not my area, but the reason I was kind of passionate about this is like, it's good, goodness me. Okay, geology isn't just mining, as was already said, but in Australia and countries where the extractive industries are so important, it is synonymous with mining in the public consciousness. You cannot separate that. Okay, and so when something like that happens, it makes communicating that much more harder. And in fact, I would say that great geocommunication, which is what I advocate, should not cover for something like that. It is not the point. It has to be tackled head on. I have a lot to say about what was gone before, but I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks, Hayden. And sorry, Annette, my apologies to you. I've actually now read your question or your comments, and it's asking, what are we doing to change this? But is there evidence that the newly graduated have less tolerance of this behaviour? It's like the Me Too movement. It's like strike for climate. The younger generation are actually becoming a lot more enabled in their ability to stand up against these things. Do we see that? Do we think? I mean, what do you reckon, Alanis?
I just wanted to add something also to that, because the Australian universities just brought out a survey about sexual harassment and sexual assault in universities and how prevalent it is. So it's something that is kind of within our universities, but also in industry. So it's something that maybe draws a larger comparisons. But yes, sorry, what was your question? Sorry.
Well, it's really about, are people becoming less tolerant of this sort of behaviour and hence reporting it? I mean, are people the Gen Zers and the younger demographic, do they stand up for themselves more often?
I would like to think so, but I'm not too sure about that actually. I am a big believer that you can't be what you can't see, or I guess the other way around. Us by seeing this on TV and those kinds of things, we've already set a precedent of or what we expect of what I guess that kind of workplace is like. And same within universities. A lot of the lecturers that we have in universities tend to be old white men, and we don't actually see a lot of women in those positions. So it's actually really hard for the younger generation, especially women, but even younger males as well, because we don't see younger males in those roles, to actually think that maybe we could be that in the future or achieve that in our near future.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you're working with Mel. No doubt Mel's inspirational for you. Pete, you've got your hand up for a comment.
Yeah, I agree with everything. Alanis just said, and but I want to touch on this. Is this issue around harassment, etc., sensitive with the Generation Z, for example, or younger people. I think it is, and rightfully so. And the reason for this is not because of individuals being more sensitive to it. I think it's because this is a generation that has a stronger lens on society and its issues. And so, you know, the climate protests that we saw in 2018 is another example of that. These are young people who care deeply for the way they interact with society, and it's very different to, say, my generation, which had a different set of value sets. And so this is really, really, really important that we understand this. And so this is not going away. And nor should it be judged negatively, because I see this as a massive positive in this generation. It's great that they have that strong social lens and social consciousness, because that's exactly what we need at the moment. These guys have nailed it.
Yeah.
Building from that, Pete, I'd say, you know, I've only been in Australia for 15 years, but there's definitely, you know, the kind of suck it up kind of mentality that is prevalent with generations, sort of older generations. You know, we had to put up with it, so you have to put up with it. And I'm really pleased to see that on all the forms that takes in the workplace, whether that be bullying or harassment, is not being, you know, that's being called out now. And I think Alana's made a very good point that, you know, what happened, you know, universities aren't, these issues are, they're just across our society. They're not specific to any one industry.
Okay, Mel.
Yeah, thanks. I guess recently, since Rio Tinto put out the report about sexual harassment and assault within their organisation, I've had a lot of my students, female students, coming to me and asking about safety in the mining industry, and that has never happened before. So thankfully, I'm able to say to them, like, at least this is happening now, because what we saw before is that the assault and harassment was happening, but nobody really knew about it because we didn't have the numbers. So it's sort of commendable that organisations like Rio Tinto are putting out those numbers and are holding themselves to account, and seem like that they're going to improve things. They're going to put policies in place. We at WMISA want to see every mining company doing this. We need to ensure that women are safe when they go to work in these organisations. What we've seen in the past is that women and men are hired at the graduate level in the mining industry at roughly the same rate as what we see the gender split in universities, so about 40% women. But very rapidly, the number of women drops off until at the most senior levels, there's hardly any women at all. So this is due certainly in part, to their experiences of harassment and assault. So I think as we learn more, this may put women off the mining industry, but hopefully it also means at the same time the industry is becoming safer for them, and that hopefully we hear about that as well.
Okay, I might just go to a comment that's in the chat box from Lucy Carson. So Lucy says, unfortunately, there's often an eye roll response to people standing up to this kind of thing by people who've been in the industry for a long time, and they see it as an overreaction. A lot of gaslighting and victim blaming, you know. So in order to keep young people, particularly young women, in the industry, there's a lot of work to be done in changing the culture in mining. And I don't think, you know, I think you're spot on there, Lucy. I mean, it's beyond the range of what we're doing here, but it has this impact, isn't it? I mean, how can you make people excited about geoscience when they see the mining sector as the main outlet, and yet here are this negative press? Hayden, you've got your hand up, I know, but I just was going to ask maybe Jenna or Craig if they had a comment in the meantime from their perspective. Jenna?
I guess I'm probably in that age bracket that is about to, we start seeing the drop off in numbers through there. And I'm really fortunate that I proactively sourced, people in the next generation to me, higher level, that can support me in those situations and to provide, this is what I've done previously. So I've very much used mentorship to overcome those battles, but I realize I'm fortunate and had that network to reach out to, and there's a lot of people that we just don't have that network. So it's definitely something, providing mentorship is pretty key, I think, to help build.
Well, and having that independence too, isn't it? Because often, as Lucy was saying, in your workplace, you don't get any traction. It gets ignored or people roll their eyes. So I do wonder if there is a role for professional organisations in this as being a bit of an arm's length. I mean, we are about professional issues, GSA, ARG, SGA, no doubt. So maybe the organisations need to shoulder some of this as well and be a portal for their members around their experiences. Hayden, sorry, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just want to link back to what Pete was saying earlier and how this relates to the wider issue of how baby boomers can connect with Gen Z. The title of this, it is about, as Pete said, it's about empathy. The reason why, you know, this generation, these young women are standing up, and Dale, from what you were saying, the reason why the climate strikes really took off in 2018 is because of the new way that they communicate. And that's why, and this is something that we need to learn from them. And as Pete was saying, as I was like doing this when he was saying, spot on empathy, it is all about empathy. The reason why this has taken off now and with the climate strikes is social media. That is exactly why it's happened. Okay. And if we aren't, and this links back to the wider question of this whole discussion panel, if we aren't using social media, then there's no way we are going to reach the next generation when it comes to the geosciences. Somebody came to me the other day at the conference in Brisbane, and they were saying, "Oh, Hayden, can you help me? I want to be able to communicate with my, people underneath me." And this person was a CEO. This is nothing to do with what I do. This is internal communication. But every single time somebody asks me that, I have to put myself in the position of the CEO. In other words, I have to commit completely to empathy, right, in order to actually imagine what it's like. So you need to us, the community, we need to understand what it is like to be a teenager today, which is our target demographic, trying to get them into university. What do they do? What do they like? And the truth is, sad as it might seem, is that they like scrolling on Instagram and being on TikTok, things like this. Everybody here has come into, it seems, to the geosciences by happenstance, by coincidence. I'm the same, Ian Stewart is the same, everybody's the same. We need to be there creating the possibility that people come into university by happenstance through the geosciences, and to do that we need to be where the next generation is, as on social media. I certainly didn't come into university because somebody brought a bunch of rocks into my classroom at school and said, "Wow, this is amazing." Didn't do that. It was something else. So I think we need to learn, seriously, this is going off topic slightly, but I think I'm just bringing it back to the general discussion. We need to learn how to use social media and be very savvy at that. And obviously we're not trained to do that as academics or anything at university to do with it.
I might jump in there quickly and sort of tag onto what Hayden just said. So yeah, I've actually done exactly what you just said, Hayden, about taking rocks to a school and presenting to grades 8 and 9. So that was where my friend basically phoned me and she said, "Craig, I'm teaching geoscience, I'm teaching earth science, I know nothing about it. And I'm just reading the book and then I'm telling them what the book tells me." And then she's like, "Would you mind coming in and having a chat?" And I took my rock collection. And I'll be honest with you, a comment that I got from my friends / other teachers were kids who were least attentive normally were the ones actually asking the questions during the class. So it basically showed me that they value, you can say, industry professionals, whether it may be, in this case it was geoscience, but and they value that a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want. Sorry, I don't want to. Sorry, Dale. Yeah.
All right.
I just want to say what you're doing is. I will say it's great what you're doing, Greg, and I think it's absolutely have to do that. I think it's just it tends to, because I'm a teacher too. It tends to get the low-hanging fruit, people who are already interested in the geosciences. But certainly, somebody having that lived experience is certainly more stimulating than a teacher who teaches to the text, for sure.
So yeah, sorry, thanks, Hayden. I was just going to throw to a couple of the comments in the chat box here from Stephanie, Adrienne, and Mark, and they're sort of around the same sort of issues we're talking here about, the lack of geoscience in the high school, secondary education curriculum, and it's challenged for science and maths teachers across the board, let alone geoscience. And then Mark raises the issue of how maybe using things like Minecraft. And Richard, I'll get you later to talk about some of the initiatives that you know are happening with the groups like Core around applying Minecraft into raising interest there. But this whole issue of education and helping to support secondary teachers who are out of their depth in geoscience, no exposure. And Pete and I were just talking about this yesterday, but it's a major challenge that we've got. So I'll throw the floor open. How do we better connect with teachers? Anyone? Pete?
I have a comment about Minecraft because I've got a 13-year-old and part of 7 years of his life playing Minecraft, and I was like, wow, this is really, as the comment says, it's about, as extracting a resource and, with a geological name most of the time and building something. So I sat him down. This is only literally last week, and I said, tell me what Minecraft's about. He's a 13-year-old now. He's been playing since he's 6, and he actually couldn't articulate it. He did not make the connection between the word mine and the fact that he was mining stuff and then building stuff. It was really interesting. It was like, so whilst we put this thing up on some pedestal that, as the savior of what we're going to do, I think there is a complete disconnect with many kids. And now my sample size is 1, but there's thousands of hours of playing it. And actually how that game relates to the real world. And so that's a disconnect that either we have to fix or we have to stop relying on Minecraft. The teacher one is, so my comment around the teacher one is really interesting. So I've had some interactions with ex-master students of mine who had become school teachers. And they, when I spoke to them, I got 2 clear messages. If you don't have a geoscience training, teachers don't feel confident in teaching geosciences. That's the first point. So they will do the reading the textbook thing, what the previous person said, and they do not innovate in that teaching. And the second point is, I raised this. I said, when you teach resources, which it was a Perth teacher, I said, do you teach in the context of mitigating climate change and critical minerals? And she said, no. And so there's a disconnect there as well, because, this generation cares deeply for climate change mitigation, and here's an opportunity that we got and we are not taking it. So when we do get the 2 weeks in front of the classroom, we have to align what we teach in the context of what they care about. So that's just a comment in general. And that said, that may be happening in other parts of the country that I haven't communicated with, but that's the feedback that I got.
Okay. Mel?
So I think there's a few things that we're doing here at JCU to try and engage with educators, high school educators a bit more. So one is that we're trying to work with people who are doing education degrees over in that part of our university and talk to them about geoscience and try and work more geoscience into the curriculum that they learn there. Another thing that some of us are doing is visiting high schools. So if you can try and target high schools, in Australia, I think the high school curriculum has geoscience being taught at, I think it's year 8, just for a few weeks. And so if they get a visit from a geoscientist at that time, and we talk about, the geoscience in a way, that we're passionate about, that makes other people care about that as well, then that's really valuable. I think that's a key time where you can really engage with students. So I think being us geoscientists being more engaged with high schools would be a way that we can help. There's also the Australian Earth Science Education Network. So you can look up their website, which is ausearthed.com.au. And this is their bread and butter. So they provide teachers with resources to help them teach earth and environmental science in schools, and some great resources there.
Okay. Alanis?
I think going into high schools is great, but I also think that maybe even starting before that. If you look at kids' clothes, kids' clothes are covered in dinosaurs, in volcanoes, and you ask a little kid what they like. They love those kinds of things, and there's already that kind of natural interest in these amazing things. If we can build on that and kind of turn that into a love of geoscience at an early age, then when they get to year 8 and they're hearing about earth science for those couple of weeks, then they can kind of draw the comparison to what they used to love and then I guess what they're learning now.
Okay. I was going to ask Jenna or Craig, sorry, have you guys been the Minecraft generation, or are you too old for that? I'm showing my boomer ignorances here.
Oh, I definitely dabbled in it, but it wasn't my. As I said earlier, I was running around outdoors a lot, so I didn't do too much computer time. I was running around playing sport on a big oval.
Yeah. Different generation, definitely. Jenna?
Yeah, I'm not Minecraft. However, I live in a street of 20 kids that are all Minecraft players. So it's definitely a resource that, like something that core learning did, is smart in a good way. But as Pete says, linking the Minecraft to building is missing.
And Richard, I know you might not be closely involved with it, but the core processing has that as an angle. What are your comments around this disconnect?
Yeah, look, I guess I've only really been involved in Geoscience Outreach I've always been out to schools and stuff. When I was up in Mount Isa, it used to amaze me that the kids in the school in Mount Isa, you could see the mine and the operation out the window. They didn't know what it was for. They knew it was a mine. They didn't know what they were mining. So there's always a disconnect, even on the ground. What Susie Urbanick's done with the Core Foundation over the last 15 years or so is amazing. What I think she does is the foundation, I think it's mainly in WA at the moment. I think they're trying to reach out. And they upskill teachers. They have essentially the teachers become ambassadors for teaching, and they have been working on, and they have developed a really cool sort of Minecraft series of games that teachers can use, and they are assessed and they fit into the curriculum. It's all great, but what Susie really emphasizes is it's not about this book learning or even the Minecraft. That's just, that's one side. But what she does so well is take the kids out into the bush, out to the rocks. They don't teach the water cycle in the classroom. They go to a creek or the sea. So it's really doing that and getting the kids out of the classroom. And, I've been in the last couple of years, I've been trying to encourage Nexus alumni to go to schools. So I thought, cool, we got 200 plus awesome, passionate geoscientists. Let's get to the classroom, but it's hard. And as Hayden says, that's one thing that can be done. Having said that, I think, if every visit inspired one kid a little bit, then it's worth it. We need to be doing more of it. But I think for me personally, what I've sort of found is, teachers need more resources. We need to help teachers learn more. So I think Melanie's idea of JCU, of, incorporating more geoscience at their training level is so important. But what I've also realized is there's so many good things that happen. There's so many good programs in each state. Here in South Australia, there's the Geoscience Pathways Project, AIG, everyone's got something that relates to Geoscience Outreach. There's no coordination. Now, whether it needs coordination is a completely different story, because I just think we need more. We just need bucket loads more of everything. And as Hayden says, social media, I guess we've set up a fledgling Nexus Rockstars YouTube channel where we're just trying to make some geo videos, but there's so much more to do. And it's really just getting it into that, getting it into every platform through teachers, through social media, and really just sharing our own passions, because we're all passionate geoscientists. Yeah,
great. Thanks, Richard. And I'm going to come to you next, Hayden, because I know you had your hand up a little while ago. But this issue of coordination is an interesting one, I think. And as Melanie raised, I think timing's everything. And if there's a couple of weeks in a curriculum where they're covering a particular content, and you knock on their door and say, I can come and take the class off your hands for 2 hours, what teacher would not dive at that? So I think that's really what we've got to get to, is a better understanding of when do they need us, because we go and knock on the door and they go, oh, no, not now.
Quickly, the timing is up to the teacher, as far as I understand it. They have things to cover in a particular semester, and they can move it around. There is flexibility. So again, it's building those relationships with individual teachers and schools, and knowing that, and like you say, timing it.
Yeah, well, look, I have a very simplistic view of the world, right? Very infantile, and I'm kind of thinking all we need to know is when. When. It's just a matter of when. Hayden.
Yes, it is, and I speak from experience because I taught geography at high school, and I actually had quite a few academics come to me, approach me, and say, "I can do this, I can do that," and it was hard to say no because a teacher's got a scheme of work, you've got boxes to tick, right? I do it in the most inspiring way I can, but I'm upskilled, right? I'm a professional. I can bring real world experience and make it more alive for the children. But if it's not my area, and the person wants to volunteer to come and do something about a particular subject, but it's absolutely not, I just cannot. And I've also got to make sure that their content ticks my learning objectives. Otherwise, they don't pass the exam. The kids don't pass the exam. It's ridiculous. You are hamstrung as a teacher. So as Richard said, you have got to build a relationship with the teacher. If you're going to do outreach successfully, you need to understand the curriculum requirements, what the learning outcomes are, and when they are being taught at school, so you can actually go there and be effective. There was something else that somebody else said I wanted to come back, but I forgot. I'll come back. Oh yeah, I know.
Okay.
Alanis said start earlier, and I completely agree with that. And I'm going to say something a bit cynical, and that is the reason we need to start earlier is because we need to build up the resistance, almost inoculate the children, because when they do go to secondary school, and it is all about tests, and it is book learning because the teachers haven't been upskilled, then their passion, which is instinctual in primary school, actually starts to wane and become less. So we need to actually get them early to build up that resistance, because it is an onslaught at secondary school. And we need to change that, definitely. But I agree we need to start earlier, but for both reasons, to inspire and to actually create that buffer, so to speak, as they enter secondary school. Yeah.
Okay. Look, we're sort of time ticking away. We're on our last 13 minutes, but and I do want to, in the last sort of 10 minutes, come in to really focus on this issue of what are we going to do now? What can we do right now to improve our outreach? But and I'm just also mindful of our audience. I don't want to make them feel that we have an outreach to them. Certainly, we've got. Here's a comment from Lucy. Role of young professionals. So having people in a similar demographic to themselves as being much more listenable to, and then they can see them as a picture of, well, there's someone more recently. And I'll just reflect on that comment, Lucy. When I talk to students, they normally ask questions about, what's the lifestyle like as a geologist, not what rocks do you get to lick. I mean, that's a given. And of course, and these are different focuses to what we've had, so our perspectives are really, really just ours. So keep an open mind. So Lucy, I think that's more of a comment. So thank you very much. Mark, we've covered off Minecraft. So this in the last 10 minutes or so around the room, and I won't interject, but what are the things we're going to do? I know, Hayden, I might let you hold your powder dry for a second. Maybe ask Alanis, Craig, and Jenna, from your perspectives, what do you think? What are the things that we'd really need to do better right now?
Oh, I'll go. I think that, as humans, one of the best things that we're able to do, and which Hayden teaches in his course actually, is storytelling, and being able to tell a story about what we do and about how, we're all passionate, so we've ticked that off the list. We just need to be able to then communicate that to them. And I think through storytelling is a really good way to actually be able to engage them, but also in a way that they can relate to something in their own life. Like for example, in Townsville, there's 2 huge mountains in Townsville. No one knows how they formed, or they walk past them every day. If you could somehow tell them how these things formed, I think being able to then relate it to something around them can be a really useful tool in getting them interested about geoscience.
Thanks, Alanis. That's a really good suggestion. And you've got some great points around local landforms, and they'll have history. First Nations people will have history about those landforms as well.
Yeah.
Jenna?
Just before we go on, I think that's also a really great thing that we should probably start to do as well, linking the history that the Aboriginals have about these landforms and what we know about them could be a really interesting way to move forward as well.
Yeah, okay. Jenna or Craig?
Definitely, I think selling the story of geology within the mineral industry and changing the changes that you can actually make with it as well, and the space where I guess a mineral resource geologist works within the renewable energy in finding those. I know previously because I started my career in coal, didn't want to tell anyone I was actually a geoscientist. And in the last probably 3 years, I've completely changed my narrative and speak up about being a geoscientist and often relate it back to cakes so that people can understand what they're looking at. But yeah, I just think we need to not be afraid of talking about geoscience, even though it is highly technical.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I like the cakes idea. We'll have to talk about that at another time. Craig.
I'll just add they taste pretty good too. No, I think I've had this conversation with Richard before, and it's all about geologists or geoscientists. We're not the best at selling ourselves, and I think Hayden touches on that in his course as well, like in his geocommunications course. And I think that's something that we need to do better, is communicate and be. We are passionate, but we need to be passionate outwards to non-geoscientists rather than within our geology circles. The other thing too is, yeah, I agree. Getting the kids when they're younger is a big thing, and yeah, I don't know. I'm a practical kind of person, so like when you can like do cool practicals, I think that's a really cool way to get kids excited about things, like blowing up volcanoes in class and doing all that. Like I don't know, that just excites me. I know it's just basic vinegar and bicarb, but that's pretty damn fun. And I think doing a lot more of that in schools. I don't know if they do that in primary school here, but when I went through primary school, that was something we did a lot of, like tsunami simulations and all that. So, and how do they trigger? It's like you got tsunami, but how does that trigger? It's an earthquake, and then blah 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 blah. And you sort of then draw that chain, and I think that also falls into what Jenna just said about the mineral sector and being proud of what you work in now, is show how exploring for, say, copper is now doing this in the environmental side of things, because that's a big part of the younger generation, is they want to know how geoscience and the mining industry particularly is not just this big bad world of mining, but it actually links towards greener future. Like you need to get this to then have batteries to then harness energy via stuff like that. So I think that's something, the flow chain, that's what I'm getting at.
That's right. Yeah, part of the solution rather than the problem. Mel, Can I get some comments from you? The future now.
Sorry, the future of.
Well, what? Sorry, Mel. I was. Yeah. What can we do now? What are the most important things for us to do right now to improve this outreach across the generations? Do you think?
So I guess I can comment on what I'm trying to do. And so what I'm trying to do is get more into the media about how awesome geology is. So what does that look like? It looks like talking when you have opportunities to talk to the media, talking about cool geological processes, talking about how Earth is made. So publishing in general science, popular science magazines like The Conversation and New Scientist and things like that, which reach a broader audience than just us geoscientists. So it's not an obvious sort of thing to do, I guess, but it's just about getting the word out that geology is about more than fossil fuels, more than mining. It's about understanding this amazing planet that we live on.
That's great, and you find them receptive. You find media are interested in what we've got to say, hey?
Yeah, so I've pitched now a couple of articles to The Conversation about just things that I wanted to write about. So one on the geological formation of Uluru, and they went for that. So I think they want readers as well. So if you can pitch something to them that would be of interest to the general public, they're up for that. I think they hear, I guess, a lot of what gets published in the Earth and Environmental Science section of The Conversation is pretty depressing, because a lot of the research is pretty depressing and climate change related. So if you can be the good news story and amongst all that, then that's really wonderful.
Okay, thanks. I said we've got some more questions coming in, but we're not going to have time to get to them. I just want to wrap up the commentary from the panel there. Pete, you did have your hand up.
Yeah, so there's two issues about what we can do. There's something that individuals can do, and there's something that we have to do collectively as a community. So all the conversations around getting our act together and doing things, as an organism together is, I want to park that. But many of the audience will be going, what can I do? Okay, and there's one really simple thing that you can do as to help the geoscience narrative, and that is to stop talking about the things that you do and in the infinitely small amount of detail that geologists like to talk in, and focus on the first part of the conversation when someone asks you what you do, you tell them why you do it and why it's important. And it's a very different conversation, because when you say give the purpose behind what you're talking about, people start to engage because they start to see how it relates to their life. And so it's a really, really basic thing that we are terrible at. We're very transactional in our communications, and we need to be much more emotive and emotional and try and connect with people. And so the other part of that is we have to listen to other people's concerns as well. And there's this great paper by Ian Stewart that highlights this in a science review. So that's the last thing that I will say.
Okay, thanks, Peter. In this session, I'm sure you're not going to have a vow of silence forever. Richard, or maybe Hayden first, and then Richard, and I might make some quick comments on some of the questions in the box. But Richard, just a minute or so.
Look, I was just going to say, I totally agree with Pete. I think that's a great summary of how we can be doing that, changing that narrative. In terms of what are we doing now, what I'm trying to do is I'm working with a talented young content creator. We're making geoscience videos that can be used by teachers that link in with what they're trying to teach, and then making that material available to people like Craig and Jenna, who could potentially go out to schools and sort of spread those lessons, I suppose, or that content. But again, I think everyone certainly should do Hayden's course for a start, so that we all have better skills to actually be able to communicate. And even if we don't take on board everything that's in the course, it starts those conversations about where we can be on the, on this outreach spectrum.
Okay, thanks, Richard. And Hayden, just a minute maybe, and then we'll make some comments on perhaps some of the last questions in the box. But please, Hayden.
Okay, very quickly, all of the above. I think what Mel's doing is amazing. I think Richard's initiative is really, really awesome. It's being similarly done in the UK to match the curriculum, the videos being produced in various different universities. That's really good. I would say one thing: the video is at least 5 times more engaging than any other content online. Okay, so I think just as a practical point of view, we need to be producing more video. And we need to, as Pete said, be connecting emotionally through that video. If we're doing it one-to-one, it's a drop in the ocean. We need to be en masse, online. I mean, producing content which connects emotionally with people. And that is a skill set that geologists can learn. Okay, so if you are a member of these organizations, yes, please feel free to do the course, see how you can do that. But yeah, online, that's the way we're going to shift society's opinion about our subject.
Okay, thanks, Hayden. And just rounding out some of the commentary in the box there. Stephen DeWitt talks about how do we potentially market geoscience when it means you're in dry and dusty environments, and sometimes without mobile coverage. So there's the challenge of fitting people into the what's the role, what's the actual workplace like versus you're really saving the world. Yeah, go out on this RC rig and you'll be fine. So I think there is a disconnect there, and it's a challenge for the industry. And then Owen's talking about the motivations for academics. They're driven by this need to publish, blah blah blah. So how do we free academics from that so they can become better motivated or enabled in outreach? So I think there are bigger challenges there as well. So I'd certainly like to thank everybody for their participation in the panel today. As Hayden's mentioned, his course, if you Google Geologize with a Z, you'll find his varying courses, including one on practical geocommunication, and it's being supported very strongly by the GSA, Geoscience, the Geological Society of Australia, and the AIG and PISA, professional organisations in Australia, trying to support their members in undertaking this understanding of how to improve their communications better in an improved way. So look, my thanks to everybody who's been engaged and involved in this. I don't think this should be the last time we do it. We should be doing this more often, and I'd certainly encourage you to join us however you can, preferably through your professional society, whichever one that is. And let's keep talking about this, and let's make things happen. Let's do it. Let's make some videos and get them out there. And there's some good stuff out there already. So thank you very much. And I think I might just have a round of applause here for all our presenters, panel, staff, and crew. Thanks for the chat and the questions. And I think we'll see you next time. Cheers.